Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today from Reuters Events and Insurance. This conversation is all about how we establish a 360-degree view of our customers to help transform the claims customer relationship. Yes, the relationship with the carrier and the customer, but in particular, in that moment of truth in claims. I'm Brian Falchuk. I'm your host. I'm a former claims guy. So I love these conversations because we get to say, no, we're not back office. We're not just the people who all the money goes out the door. We are the product, right? It's the most important piece of the insurance puzzle. And yes, I will be on a soapbox about that because we matter. But in all honesty, this is such an important moment because this is where we prove things to the customer. This is also where such critical data really comes to life, not just about the exposure and the risk and the way it's playing out. Maybe you learn about other drivers that weren't on the policy that actually are on the car. But you also learn so much about what your customers actually care about, how they want you to work with them, what's going on in their lives, things you don't pick up through the regular course of underwriting, things you don't pick up through bill payment, and whatever other, normal interactions we have throughout the course of a policy life until that moment of truth. So claims so critical in really giving a true 360-degree view of the customer for the carrier overall, but for the delivery of that claim service. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel. I'm going to introduce our guests in just a moment. Before I do that, a reminder to all of you listening in today, you can ask questions if you're watching this live. There's a little Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. Please do click on that, ask your questions, and you don't have to wait as people are sharing thoughts. If something comes to mind, throw it in there and we will do our best to get to it. That's how we have the best kind of conversation. So please ask those questions as we go along. I'm joined by 4 great people today. I'm going to introduce them one by one and get some thoughts from each of them. And then we're going to move right into Q&A. So let me start with Jon Thornton. Jon is a Vice President of Claims Strategy and Transformation at Westfield Insurance. Jon joins us today from the great state of Ohio, unless I'm wrong, unless you're somewhere else normally, but in Ohio these days, right, Jon?
I actually I live in Florida. I'm in the
I had no idea.
area.
All right, well, okay, I'm already learning
to keep
things.
It that way.
See, and I thought I knew you. Jon, if you wouldn't mind kicking things off a little bit and sharing some thoughts from your perspective at Westfield.
Absolutely, and it's great to participate in these events. I always learn a lot by participating in them, and in keeping with the accurate, consistent, and relevant data theme, I'll discuss, part of our data journey, and under the power of tech, I'll discuss some of the items we're working on there. I must admit, we're really not using the content federation, but are continuing our journey in capturing content, centralizing it, and needing to find ways under the knowledge management banner to capitalize on it, not just tactically, but strategically. Are we giving our session right now?
Yeah, by all means, give it some.
Oh, okay.
No, please. Yeah, I'd love to hear some thoughts, and everyone's waiting with bated breath as we each go around and do that, and then we'll move into Q&A. But yeah, please.
Okay, perfect. Means. I wanted to make sure we weren't doing introductions. So it's a great time in our industry. It's exciting, but I also think it's probably one of the most challenging times. We're all being asked to provide very high degrees of customer service, provide a truly modern customer experience while we're paying what we owe, and also reducing our overall costs. So along with this, we're leading our teams through significant continuous change. We have new operating models that we're building or implementing. We have new technology and processes flying at us, very rapidly. And then also there's the talent that we're trying to attract and retain. It's quite a challenge. Fortunately, these don't have to be mutually exclusive. I thought I'd hit some of what is working, and then also talk about some of our challenges to start us out. While I discuss our data journey, I want to make clear that our employees are really the focus at the end of the day. These are all, that's the most important asset we all have. Ultimately, we can serve our customers better, pay what we owe more accurately, and create efficiencies and effectiveness to help our staff work the items that best fit their skill sets and help with their challenges. The industry has been pretty impressive recently, and especially in the claims space. Over the past decade, as new ideas, technologies, and processes have emerged to help us with these challenges, most claims organizations have adopted new claims systems, some data access and reporting solutions, e-content solutions, and then related, we have the foundations forming for modernizing the customer experience and helping create more efficiencies. But those really are just now table stakes. We're on the journey to better understand our customers, their preferences, and to optimize the customer data to help us provide proactive experiences to our customers. The journey begins with asking the many questions we're all asking. Who is our customer? What types of services do they want or need? What do we know about our customers? What channels do they want to interact with us with? And a ton of other related questions. We're all capturing, and I'll say attempting to capture and prioritize this data so that we can advance our operations. But the organizational view is kind of one of our biggest challenges. So Westfield is a super regional. We've been around since 1848, so we've gone through a lot of transformation over the years from the farmers who started our company in the farmlands of Ohio. But I think like most, and we're in super regional, meaning we're in about 20 states, and we're about 2 billion in premium, just to give you some orientation around that. We're about 70% commercial lines now, and the rest is personal lines. But like most carriers, our data, it's proliferating at a speed greater than our capabilities to aggregate it and to harness it. As an organization, about 15 years ago, we started in earnest to advance our data strategy to modernize the view. We started a business intelligence system to help us aggregate, define, and provide consistent views of the data for the organization, and to drive that view to be accessible to our end users. So most of all of our staff has access to the data they need, but we certainly have other resources to help with some of the more complex problems that we face. We centralized our analytics and the resources area into the Analytics Resource Center. And that was to provide a consistent view and approach to providing data with dedicated resources that point to each department. So we all have relationship managers in that area. That platform and unit has progressed with updates, new data sources, and ease of use enhancements. However, it really is still pretty complex for most of the lay people. We provided a lot of self-service capabilities, and it's been a challenge for most of our leaders. It is our single source of truth for most data. Financial reporting, policy and claims data in the organization, except for when it's not. So what I mean by that is 80% of what we need to run our business and understand and adjust, it's captured in our BI tool, where data is defined the same, sourced the same, and produced in the same format. But I'm assuming, like many of you, we're adding sources, systems, and new data all the time. And we have vendors and standalone systems that do not feed into that BI system. So this makes for some different views of the data, different potential definitions or time parameters, and challenges ingesting new items into the warehouse with the associated complexity that creates. We've moved through fundamental predictive models. We have claim severity tools, underwriting predictives. We have fundamental AI, segmentation and assignment for claims. We are using a lot of visualization tools, and now more advanced predictive experiments are taking place with exception-based supervision and advanced litigation models. AI, we're automating some of our QA and more advanced analytics and data science strategies. We've moved beyond the basics to a large degree of data governance and data management to more advanced views with access to the data. In claims, when we moved to our new claim system it's been about 7 to 10 years ago, we used that transformation to add and complete many vendor integrations, initiate process and organizational changes, and we started our data-enabled path. We built out deeper data related to coverage construct, causes of loss, lost data segments and elements, and all really to help our business partner needs. And we started to build out our predictive models, AI and machine enabled capabilities through vendors we used. And we did some home-based experiments and tools within that analytics resource center. We moved to a more structured data environment. That was a big change from the open free note system we had in the past. That all requires data definition work and data integrity work to ensure we're using the right fields. To get those fields completed is a challenge. You don't want to require every field because it really slows down the process, but the adjuster, the claim professionals also don't always want to fill out everything the way we want it. So there's a lot of change management to ensure adjusters understand the value and why it's important and how we want to use it organizationally. We also back then moved to an electronic document environment. And that was for the first time in our company. I mean, we really went from paper files to electronic files. These are also obviously table stakes these days, and advancing those capabilities within claims, but also within our organization, as we've rolled into photo and video estimating, texting, and other customer-facing tools. So we can handle the ingestion and use of most of the documents today, but we're still working on our large file formats, videos, medical packages to provide better ease of use for our staff. We're not at the federated content space in claims or in the organization, but we're moving towards great aggregation of data from our systems and the analysis of that data, both in claims and in the organization. Our customer data journey, probably like yours, is evolving. And if you feel like us, you're always feeling a little bit behind the curve, despite all the advances. So over the past few years, we've greatly evolved our reporting and dashboard data visualization, organizational data science, agent and customer digital, customer sentiment, customer call analysis, predictive and machine learning capabilities and experiments. Like many of you, we're all on a journey to deliver that customer-driven processing experience with our high frequency, low severity claims, and the data enablement needed with the tools and our other claims and claims processes involved with that. This journey so far is producing a higher customer net promoter score. We're at 74 for 2021 so far. And when some of the tools that we have enabled are involved in the claim, we're able to measure about a 7 to 8 point improvement in that, just for instance, with texting and some of the digital capabilities. We've also, over the past 7 years, achieved about over 20% efficiency while still maintaining our indemnity, paying what we owe goals there too. So where do we have opportunities? Transformation is all about change, and our team's ability to consume that change is really important. Changing the tire while the car is moving is difficult, and I think sometimes we've underestimated that. We've had successes and failures and learned from both, and then really in the customer data and document journey. We've moved to a more structured data and pushed the frontline popular data integrity issue. Population data integrity issue. We've had a lot of choices as to where to spend our limited budgets, and the sheer choice can be a little overwhelming. We're sometimes prioritized, sometimes not, as we look at organizational priorities. I've learned it's incumbent to have an organizational view when proceeding and influencing the overall progression of capabilities organizationally while advancing the claims and customer care organizations. So we have our customer and claims organizations rolling up to our chief claims and customer service officer, and that's Rob Bowers. For us, it's been 2 steps forward, one step back, but a steady progression over time. We're not exactly where we want to be, but we don't think we'll ever be exactly where we want to be. But we're in a much more advanced place than we were, and we continue to move it forward.
Jon, that's great, and I think you've been really honest about that, which I appreciate. Because a lot of times in these conversations, like everything's perfect, we did great, ROI's perfect, but you've made great progress. It's not 100% of where you want to go, but that ball's also moving. So there's never getting to 100. I appreciate the comments. Thank you for that. I want to introduce Sean Baird and Randy Dufault, who join us from 2 different companies, from Highland, Nuxeo, and Randy joins us from Genus Technologies. Some thoughts from the 2 of you, and I appreciate, Jon really took us in a deep dive of Westfield. You guys see a lot across many different situations. So I'm curious what your take is as we think about this broader view of the customer and the ways that we can pull from the interactions to understand what they care about more. So Sean and Randy, I'll kick it over to you.
I will start and I'll let Randy follow on after me. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining. I'm very excited to be here and participate. So my name's Sean Baird and I'm a director of product marketing at Highland, which recently acquired Nuxeo. So that's where there's maybe a little confusion about the company name. But generally, both Highland and Nuxeo share really a passion for helping our customers manage their important information. And I think we see claims as an area where customers are increasingly coming to us looking for ways that they can better manage their information so that they can improve directly the speed and the accuracy of their claims. They can reduce a lot of the costs around their claims processing, and they can get better decisions and ultimately better results as an outcome. So I echo a lot of what Jon was mentioning there. A lot of companies in the insurance industry are really looking at upstart insurtech companies that are delivering new user experiences, finding new efficiencies that really challenge the industry. And I think the big factor that we can't ignore is that the pandemic that we've been facing over the past couple of years and the impact that's had in terms of distributing our workforces, separating us from the systems that we rely on, especially if you're still working on paper, separating you from the paper that you need to claim. I think from a Highland and Nuxeo perspective, we look at 3 key areas that we can offer value for organizations. One is around providing better access for information. Jon mentioned that they aren't pursuing federation, but we do see a lot of customers that have legacy systems that they need to bring together with existing systems. Maybe they've been acquisitive and have 2 or 3 different claims processing systems because each company had their own. So being able to federate those systems and provide one way to access the information, regardless of where it exists in your organization, really can provide a lot of value for organization. Improving efficiency, we see this as a really important area, and it's certainly one of the areas that InsurTech is driving innovation. But Jon touched on this, but we are seeing companies really look at artificial intelligence and machine learning, RPA, as ways to provide better information, be able to make better decisions, and in many cases automate some of the manual tasks that customers have been struggling to get through, and has really limited their ability to impact the efficiency of the organization. So that's really an area where you can invest, and there's commodity technologies that are available from the Amazons and Googles and Microsofts of the world, as well as companies that are very specifically targeting AI. I think the one key thing that I'll point out there is look for solutions that provide you some low-code options. Artificial intelligence and machine learning can become extremely expensive and extremely specialized field very quickly. And if you can find tools that bring down the technical bar, that allow you to use self-learning to be able to find commonalities between documents, to be able to find ways to derive new insights from the content, I think you're going to be a lot more successful, because I think this is one of those areas where we're going to need to iterate over time. We're going to try solutions. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't, but we're going to need to probably make modifications regardless as we go. So ways that you can, don't consider just the cost of the actual project itself, because it's probably going to be extending for another 6 to 12 months afterwards as you try to refine those models and get them down to really delivering the kind of results you're looking for. And then the final thing, and again, I think this is an area where InsurTech is really pushing the industry, is around customer experience. Providing ubiquitous cloud-based or web-based technologies that allow your customers to access, over the web, using mobile devices, and be able to submit content or make claims, I think is really critical. And providing a better customer experience is one that helps drive loyalty to your organization, to your insurer, and I think ultimately will retain those customers for long term and be beneficial to you as an insurer. And I'll hand it over to Randy at this point.
Thanks, Sean.
Oh, thanks, John. Yeah, so I'm Randy Dufault, and I work for Genus Technologies, and we're a systems integrator that's helped a lot of organizations over 3 decades now work primarily in content and other unstructured media, solve those sorts of issues. I serve in a role as a lead analyst and help a lot with system design and delivering solutions for clients. So just to talk about a couple of situations where we've had where we've been able to help insurance carriers. One example is a single line workers' comp carrier that needed to improve the way that their claim staff access documents inside claim workflows. As you can imagine, the volume of documentation associated with a work comp claim can be huge, particularly when the claim extends for months or even years. So in their claims workflows, the work items showed up with a full set of documents for the claim in a single list. And then the various staff that had to work on that were involved had to spend a significant amount of time sorting, searching, and otherwise just scrolling to find the particular documents that they needed. As you might expect, claim staff and their management demanded some improvement. So a project got underway to address the issue, and the first step was to look at the way that documents enter the content services system, how they're identified, the taxonomy, if you will. Working with a number of claims SMEs, a really complex current system was simplified and restructured to represent the different aspects of the claim adjudication process. That structure then allowed documents to flow into folders associated with steps like nurse review, payment processing, audit, and so on. And one of the beauties of a folder-based approach like that is that the same documents can appear in multiple folders. For example, a claim administrator and review nurse may have 1 or 2 documents in common that they reference in order to get their work done. Once we implemented, workflow items opened showing the folder most appropriate for the process step. And each role saw the documents they needed when they needed them. They also had access to everything, but the important content was right at their fingertips. And in another case, we were working with a multi-line P&C that started seeing a vast and growing amount of rich media content items arriving in their claims organization. Policyholders, adjusters, and others. Out in the field, we're sending CCTV video, drone video, high-resolution photos, and other stuff over channels like file sharing systems and mobile devices, and even USB drives sent in the mail. So the PNC Shared Services Organization ended up dedicating staff just to get those files into a form the content services system could store and that the claims organization could process. And the cost of staffing that alone was having an impact on their expense ratios. So by applying some advanced content services like transcoding, we were able to automate the processing and filing of those rich media items. Transcoding, by the way, is the act of transitioning a file from one type to another. In this case, transcoding allowed the videos to be normalized, turned into a generic format. And claim staff then got the exact same experience when they were viewing any video, whether it came from a smartphone, a CCTV system, or from a drone. And when configured properly, the normalized version absolutely retains all the original resolution and other qualities of the source video file. There also was a challenge with pictures received from mobile phones. Both Apple and Google now will create proprietary format video photos that web browsers and other desktop kinds of systems just can't view. So transcoding again can normalize the files to a common, easy to process format. So once that system was in place, compliance improved. Things were claim staff had almost immediate and consistent access to the content. And then shared services staff got those staffing costs under control. The expense impact of that growing rich media content stream just no longer was an issue. And we're currently working with another carrier that's actually sending physical media containing rich content to their remote workers. Obviously something they didn't have to do prior to the pandemic. And the result of what they're doing has been a significant increase in lost and misplaced files, and of course, creating a real compliance challenge. They are implementing a similar automation and transcoding solution to virtualize all of that various content. So there are other examples that we've been able to help folks with, but I think the idea of optimizing a claims process, the content related to a claims process really can give you that view of the customer that you need and want.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Randy. Bringing that all together, that we can't just do process improvement. We have to think about the inputs and the things that we're interacting with throughout those processes. If anyone's tried to upload photos from your iPhone into a website and it says it's not a JPEG is typically what it needs, and you're like, but I just took this picture. What do you mean it doesn't work? Yeah, very frustrating. And of course, one thing for some fun personal thing, it's a whole other when you're trying to properly document something where we're talking about evidence of a loss. It's much more critical. Thank you for that. Kimberly Vaughn, who joins us as the AVP Claims Experience and Customer Analytics, or AVP for Claims Experience and Customer Analytics for Amerisure. I'd love some thoughts from you. And then we're going to go into the Q&A, which is a subtle reminder to our audience. What questions do you have? What do you want us to dig into? So Kimberly, over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here this morning. As Brian mentioned, I'm Kimberly Vaughn. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Claims Experience and Customer Analytics for Amerisure. We, like Westfield, are a super regional carrier. We're based in Michigan. And I thought we were old because we've been around since 1912, but apparently Westfield has us beat by a couple decades, more than a couple decades. So, but that's okay. And really, what I thought as I was coming here today and knew that I'd be the one bringing us home here and kind of before we get to the question and answer, and I thought, what can I give as takeaways for the audience? You came here today because you thought, Clearly the topic was very interesting. You know, the sub bullets, maybe you were attracted by the charismatic panelists that we were going to have here today. But one of the things that I want to make sure you could leave with were really some tactical things that if you are starting out in your company and you're trying to get a hold of all of this data and put it in a way that you know you can use it later, I wanted to be able to leave you with that. And so there are so many cool tools out in the industry to help us with data. And some of those, you know, we discussed here today, there are, you know, a million of them, but there are some things that you have to do to set a foundation for your organization before you can even really utilize these tools. And so there are kind of 4 themes I'm going to visit real quickly. And one is to think about who is your customer. And so Jon brought that up in his opening remarks, talking about data integrity, a single source of truth, and then also how do you get your employees on board with data ownership? Because ultimately they are the people who are going to be responsible for getting that into your system so it can even be used at all. So the first question is, who is your customer? And in your organization, you may have, that just is off the tip of your tongue. In other organizations, you may need to take a beat and think about who really is your customer. At Amerisure, our primary customer, or what I call our customer with a big C, are our agents. But we also have customers, I call it customers with a little c, or really maybe a better word is stakeholders. And that includes our policyholders, our third-party claimants, and of course, our employees. And so all of these parties contribute to and benefit from data collection. And so it's important to keep them in mind as you are building out your systems. Of course, the concept that underpins anything to do with technology is going to be data integrity. And so, data integrity leads to happier customers and better insights. It saves time, so efficiency, and it builds trust or your brand reputation with your customers. And so, related to the discussion here today, it really is truly the prerequisite for any technology solutions. So what do I mean when I say data integrity? What I mean is that data needs to be accurate, it needs to be consistent, it needs to be timely, and it needs to be maintained. And so part of data integrity is data quality. Sometimes we think that integrity and quality are synonyms. In this context, they sort of aren't. Data integrity is broader than data quality, but data quality is, of course, a very important part of it. We have, in the form of being accurate, accuracy is both form and content. So is it correct? And it can be incorrect because it's been gathered from the wrong source. It was, entered erroneously. We still have a lot of manual entry in a lot of organizations. And so those things can happen, accidents happen. We need the data to be consistent. It has to be recorded uniformly, and it needs to be gathered from the same source each time. So does the data always mean the same thing? Making sure that, folks have a common understanding of what certain data points are and where we get them. Being timely. So if the information doesn't make it into the system timely, it may not be useful. And I think just as a very fundamental example of, say, Medicare compliance, which a lot of you in the audience have organizations, your RREs, right? Your mandatory reporters to CMS. And if that data is not in the system and it doesn't make it to Medicare during the query process that happens, we have monthly and quarterly obligations there, it can be a major problem. So the data has to be timely, and then it has to be maintained. So we all know data changes throughout the life cycle of a claim. Who is updating it? Who owns the maintenance? It's really important in your organizations to be clear in order to make sure that happens successfully. So the next step is talking a little bit about what is a single source of truth. And so for any of our IT friends in the audience, you say to yourself, a single source of truth is a term of art in IT. It really means something very, very specific. And so it means that every data element is edited in one place. And I always call it's a place where it lives. And so any other location where the data is shared, it always is linked back to that single source of truth, a place where that data lives, as the primary source. And so that way, when you're in your organization, you don't have to update something in 20 places, right? You just update it at the single source of truth, and it flows through to all of the other applications. But when I'm talking about a single source of truth in this context, I'm really using it more colloquially, right? Like to say, are we all operating from the same information? It's something as simple as if we run a report, across departments, in Amerisure, we're highly collaborative, we're constantly working, claims, underwriting, risk management, we're constantly working together. And there have been times when we've run reports on what we think is the same topic, and we somehow end up with different numbers or different results or different information. And you say to yourself, how is this happening? We're all asking for the same thing. So it's really about creating an organization where there is a single source of truth. So no matter the department, no matter the person, they're going, and when they pull something, we know that it's going to be reliable. And if it's shared with our external customers in particular, that it's going to be the same. And so the last point that I want to touch on is, how do we get employees to be responsible for data integrity? How do you inspire that compliance, that ownership that our employees need to have in order to ensure a really responsible data program? And so first of all, you have to promote a culture of integrity, data integrity. It is, of course, it has to start at the top. Everything starts at the top. You know, our executive leaders need to send that message. But at the end of the day, the people who are responsible for it and have to live it the most are frontline leaders. So when you think about a claims organization, you're thinking about, you know, unit managers and things like that. And also, of course, the individual contributors, those folks who are handling the claims. Making sure that they really understand why it's important and how this culture really needs to permeate the organization. Employees need to know why it matters. Why does it matter? Why does it matter that I enter this correctly? Why can't I just abbreviate it? Why, you know, a million different things, right? So it's about creating that awareness of why it's important. Training our folks, you've got to keep people trained up. And coaching is a thing that's a living process. It's not just a one-time thing. It really is addressing it. Sometimes it needs to be addressed globally with, you know, an entire department, an entire team. Other times it really needs to be targeted, because there's nothing that irritates high performers more, people who are doing the job more, than having to be retrained over the thing that they're already doing correctly, right? So making sure that you're targeting those folks who maybe are struggling a little bit more, don't understand what's going on. Making your systems easy to use and streamlining them and standardizing. If things are standardized, it's easier for people to remember and follow. It's really key to great data. Reducing the complexity of collecting and entering the data. And for a lot of claims organizations, or really insurance organizations generally, you may be working in what feels like 100 different platforms. And that can be really confusing. It makes things really hard, especially if you got to put the same piece of information in multiple spots. So to the extent that you can make that process easier for the collection and the entry is really important. And then implementing quality control measures. So whether that's an audit program, it may be, you know, something that managers are doing themselves. You may have an entirely separate quality control or audit department, but you need to figure out how they fit into the mix. And then finally, remembering that data integrity, it takes time. If employees are too busy or they are rushed, they are more likely to make mistakes. And so making sure that their desks are organized in such a way that they have the time and they have the intellectual bandwidth necessary to make sure that their data is all in line and looking beautiful at any given point in time. So I hope some of those tactics are things that you can take back to your organizations as you go on this journey, whether you're right at the beginning or you're somewhere in the middle, or maybe, God bless you, you're already at the end. But those are hopefully things that you can use in your practice. And I just really appreciate the time to talk with you all today.
That's great, Kimberly. Really practical and again, honest. I think we've heard some very real examples and experiences of the fact that actually this isn't that simple. But there are also ways to go about it. There are solutions to do it, and it's something we can make progress on. We don't have to do it all at once, or we can stare at the mountain that's in front of us and just sort of cower. But actually, we can start to take some steps and implement some of these tools and processes and approaches, and get towards where we're trying to get, even though the bar continues to rise. Fantastic conversation. I do want to remind the audience, I'd love to get your questions so that we can dig in. I do have some things that came to mind as I listened to all of these conversations. Kimberly, you used the word stakeholders. And as I think about that, you know, one of the things that's really difficult for us is probably more so in claims than in underwriting, because in underwriting, at least you can try to use your application. You might get a competitor's app depending on the line of business and your distribution channel, but you know, we're talking about fairly standardized kinds of information. Now, there may be exhibits that come with it that are PDFs or Excel or whatever, or photos, but generally for what the underwriters need to do, there's some level of standardization and commonality to what they're receiving. In claims, anything can happen. Every lawsuit looks different, even though there's only so many cars in the universe, different models and makes and what have you, they can get cracked up lots of different ways. So, everything ends up being unique, and the parties we deal with are unique. So to be able to look at those stakeholders, whether it's the customer, a third party claimant, the agent or broker, a body shop, a contractor, a doctor's office, what have you, lots of different parties that if we want to get more standardized data, if we want to implement new tools, we have to get all of them to get on board with that. And that's near impossible, right? We can't expect everyone to do things exactly as we want them to. So I'm curious, and we'll go around to everyone, but some thoughts on some of the ways where you are wading into this sort of sea of like a million different ways that the outside world may be interacting with you. How do you face that sort of question? And maybe some examples of ways that you've been able to bring some commonality or some cleaning up of what's coming in, so you can sort of make sense of it and move forward. And Randy, some of the things you talked about come to mind. That maybe it's the tools that help you clean that up because you can't change those people. But I'm curious what everyone's seeing from that. Sean, if you don't mind, I'd love to start with you, and then we'll kind of mix carrier and solution provider and vendor sort of mentalities here or backgrounds. But yeah, Sean, if we can open up with you. You're just on mute. So
yep. Sorry about that. No, I think that's a really good question. And I think it kind of echoes some of the things that Kimberly was talking about in terms of standardizing the way you're dealing with information. So, you mentioned, different file formats of graphics. There might be, I think another thing I've run into a lot of times, you submit a photo that you just took off your phone. It's like, no, I have a limit of 500 megabytes, for this size. It's like, well, okay, well, I know how to do that. I'm a tech, but what does the average person do when they run into that situation? How do they have the tools even to be able to reduce the resolution of a photo to be able to submit it? So things like that, I think are certainly impact the way people interact with the system, regardless of where they're coming from. I think one of the things that I think that's occurring in technology now that can really help with this is understanding where those friction points are and getting some insights into where there might be some issues that you need to develop new processes, develop new capabilities within your solution to be able to deal with, whether it's reducing the resolution of a photo, whether it's standardizing file types, whether it's extracting key pieces of information from a document that maybe isn't a form that I've ever seen before, but I can glean some insights from that document that allow me to understand what it is, maybe get some fielded information off that I can still automate. But being able to stand back at the end of the day and look at the performance of this system and find out where those friction points are, I think is extremely important, and being able to address, where some of those stakeholders may have challenges.
No, I'm on mute. That's great. I think it's a great point. It's that sort of customer mindset or stakeholder mindset is, well, why am I getting all of these different things, instead of just sort of being frustrated or throwing your hands up and saying, I can't do anything about it, and try to then see, well, what do we do about it? John, what about some thoughts from you here?
Well, what came to mind, I mean, it's obviously a big challenge, but what came to mind is when we were designing our customer facing tools and those integrations, we were a Guidewire claim center organization. So we spent a lot of time making sure the mapping of those data fields from those systems. I think if the proper work is done there, I think there's obviously stuff can come in various ways, but if it's customer facing and it's information, we have to make sure the terminology is the same. We do a lot of, I'm glad I'm not on it currently, but I've been on the data governance committee where, any screen is scrubbed for all of that, making sure the terminology belongs in our data dictionary. And then when it's customer facing or it's external, we try to put that same planning and rigor in place. But I think then it comes back to what Sean said too, and just find out where you're struggling with it and try to tackle those as individual opportunities.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. You can't, it's the old eat the elephant adage, which It's never, it's not a nice image. Randy, take us away from that terrible image. What are some thoughts you have here? Because you did talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, I did, and I think one of the key things to remember is just getting this stuff in context. The stream of stuff is just massive and growing, it's no longer, you know, a document in a police report, and so I think as you present that to staff, how do they get to what they need, right? And there's just a growing number of tools that are helping us with that now. The idea of AI and being able to apply AI to incoming content. Certainly we can get it in the context of the claim. That's easy, but then how do we get it into the context of what's being done with the claim, and get it organized in a way that that folks don't have to spend a large share of their day just scrolling through lists of pictures and looking at them. One interesting case was in a casualty situation where they were it was with a large retailer, and there's receiving massive amounts of video, and frankly, the claim examiner just sat and watched all of this video. They asked for 6 views or something like that. They had a set of video, and it was hours of video for an incident. So how do we create context around that and try to make that process better?
Yeah, it's almost like the saying content is king. Here it's almost context is. Context can enlighten whatever new tools we can bring to bear, so we can understand what it is we got, rather than trying to force structure on it. Let the structure come out of the unstructured insights within it, but you need context to get there. I can only imagine what hours of video kind of, you know, looking over a loss might have been. That's a lot to take in. Kimberly, you sparked this whole thing with the stakeholders comments. I'd love to close this question up with some thoughts from you.
Sure. So one very practical example that we have from our organization is, you know, there's always a lot of discussion around location coding. So we have a lot of very sophisticated policyholders. They are spread across many geographies. They have a lot of locations. And in order for them to have insight into, you know, where are claims happening, where do we have opportunities for improvement from a risk management standpoint, they need that information from us in a very digestible way. And so one of the things that we've done, I think that will help service that, is that through our customer portal, we have a digital first notice of loss option where whether it's the agent or the policyholder can go into that and report the claim directly. And by putting together various drop-down menus, things like selecting, you know, all the policies they've ever had in force with Amerisure, right? Picking the one that applies. If they have different lines of business, picking the one that applies. The location coding, they can go in and pick it. You know, often they are the expert, right, at the location. What was the location of the accident? That helps us. We certainly confirm that information when we do our claim investigation, but when it's answered directly by them from a drop-down menu in the beginning of the process, it really streamlines that moving forward. And we just find that we get much better data, and of course, then are able to give them better insights into what's going on in their different locations.
That's also very helpful. It's a good conversation. It's a very honest one. And so the next question kind of hits at that. You know, a lot of us have put significant money into solutions that we have right now. And, you know, certainly right before lockdown started, we thought they were okay. Maybe customers didn't love them, but, you know, we were still up and running. And then suddenly a lot of those solutions we realized are not up to snuff. And things haven't been resetting back to pre-lockdowns, that, you know, this is the way things will go and it's only going to accelerate. How do we come to grips with maybe that difficult moment where, you know, we've spent in some cases, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on your scale and the scale of the solution, maybe a new core system, and you're feeling constrained. and you're seeing new things that you need to put in, but maybe from a leadership standpoint, it's, well, we already invested in this. Why do you need more? How do we, the budgeting and the investment points have come up here and there. How do we sort of marry those two where, yes, we have spent a lot, we have put a lot in place as an industry, as individual companies, and there's a different need or a more pressing need, and we have to invest again. How do you see through that? Does that preclude certain kinds of solutions? Does it force you down a simpler path? Does that make some of the new SaaS approaches more, a better fit, maybe more palatable than they would have been before? I'm curious about the sort of reinvesting in something that, we thought we invested in already. Again, it's a very honest conversation. I appreciate maybe it's sensitive in some carriers, but how do we navigate that? Because that is something that keeps coming back, the sort of like business case of reinvestment. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I also want to put you all on the spot. I'm curious to dig into this. Jon, you smiled when I said that, so that you were the magnet for it.
Yeah, I just think that we were faced with that with almost every solution we implement. It's kind of like, you strike when the iron's hot, and when, I'm sure everybody is challenged with their IT resources and the limitations there. And for us, I mean, I'll have no problem getting what I need if it aligns directly with the support of a competitive business strategy of our business partner. So if it has a clear line of sight to helping us achieve something that, is a priority or part of, commercial lines or personal lines strategies, then I usually don't have an issue with reinvestment. But if it's not as black and white and an ROI is not painted, it's definitely more of a challenge. So it's not a great answer. It's just that's how it is.
It's reality, right?
You have to, and you have to really try to find the support of it with, financially or whatever it's going to help solve. Sometimes, like Kimberly brought up, some of what I'm finding is the biggest challenge is keeping up with the regulation and compliance needs. So if I spend all of my energy making sure we're Medicare compliant, which we do, but I mean, that eats up my roadmap and my strategic investments. So balancing that right now is probably one of the biggest challenges. But this data, this falls right in line with, a lot of times it's also to produce the compliance and regulatory demands upon the carriers.
Yeah, and those are total non-negotiables.
Right.
So that can, all of a sudden wipe out whatever plans you had for other innovation, because resources are not unlimited. Yeah, thank you for that. And that sparked another question that I hope we can dig into. But Sean, some thoughts from you on this, and maybe helping folks navigate this exact question, I suppose.
Yeah, I think one of the things that when we engage with a customer and we're looking to try to advise them on how they can improve their existing systems, we also often look for ways that we can augment what they already have. So, rip and replace type of situations are very painful. They're extraordinarily expensive. They're lengthy. They're just fraught with issues. So one of the things we try to do is look at where their pain points are, and I know that many people use Guidewire, for example, to help automate and be able to provide access to their claim information so they can go through the claims process. But we often help those customers by providing stronger information management, information governance capabilities. Jon mentioned, compliance challenges, and oftentimes one solution by itself is not going to address all of your challenges, right? So being able to figure out how you can fit different technologies together to fully address your situation is certainly an important one. And I think one of the things that's really changing, that's exciting for companies that are looking to invest, is that those technologies are increasingly able to be integrated much more simply than they were in years past. And we've had a lot of success by helping customers to augment something like a Guidewire, their claims processing systems, by adding information management, information governance capabilities. And by doing that in an integrated way that doesn't require their end users to be flipping back and forth between different environments to be able to access it. They can get all their information, not just the basic claim information that Guidewire is managing, but the documentation that's helping to support that, the stuff that you need to have retention policies around or need to be able to declare as records once you're through with the process. You know, your content services capabilities can help augment what Guidewire does, and certainly, you know, Highland and Nuxeo can help support that kind of need from the customer.
Sean, that was great because you actually just spoke to that other question that came in while John was talking. So I don't think we have time for it, but you secretly provided some great insights for it without even knowing what the question was. So it's great. But yeah, it is a different world. The tools are different. We can start to use maybe some lighter weight solutions to augment, you know, in the same way we're trying to augment our people to take away some of the minutia, the logistical tedium that they have to deal with. We can do that for those bigger investments we've been making historically, to supercharge them or to solve for some of the gaps that are emerging in them as we try to look towards, you know, what are we supposed to do next? Kimberly, yeah, I was calling you, please jump in.
Well, and I think, you know, everything that everyone has said is absolutely spot on. I mean, resources are finite, right? That's just the way of the world. But I think something that cannot be underestimated is something, you know, and when I say real talk, right, where we're trying to be real honest here, is there's a lot of emotional investment on the part of folks in the organization on technology, especially if it's technology that maybe a number of years ago, you know, they worked really hard on, they built out, they were in charge of that project. And it can be hard at times to move forward with that because, you know, folks are resistant and they have, you know, for good reason, a lot of emotional attachment to certain things that they've worked on in their past. And, you know, I kind of liken it to, you know, for all the claims professionals on the call, but, you know, you think about you're fighting this case, you're fighting, you're taking this to trial, right? We've all been there. And all of a sudden someone has to come over and they gently touch you on the shoulder and they say, we are now throwing good money after bad. We have to change the strategy. And so I think you have to really be mindful of the emotional and the human component in having those discussions, because if you can't lay that groundwork, you can make the most compelling business case on the planet, and it will not always succeed unless you address that first. So I would encourage people to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's, I think we've all seen the $1 million claim that you could spend $2 million to not pay. And it's a tough thing, right? That's an ethical dilemma as a human being. And yet that's not what our job is. It's not to prove people right or wrong. But you have to go home at night and look at yourself in the mirror and all those kinds of things. It's tricky, not dissimilar to some of these investment decisions. It's a very fair point. Randy, I think you're going to end up bringing us home as we're getting close to the top of the hour. So some closing thoughts from you on this as well.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that's been missing out of some of this investment that we've been making is the idea of adaptability. And there's great things coming available and coming for us now. Sean mentioned the ease of integration in aspects of systems now, like low code, the idea of being able to spend relatively, in traditional terms, relatively small amounts of resource in adapting a solution to really changing environments. The pandemic was the key one, right? It changed things overnight. And so how could we adapt to that? Were these adaptable systems? And likewise, the changing environment of how we're communicating and otherwise dealing with our policyholders and claimants and whatnot. And so I think cloud brings us a lot of capability there, the low code stuff, the just overall ease of making that. So that just needs to be part of the vision as these new investments are being made. Is this system adaptable?
Yeah, is it adaptable, and are there sort of lighter weight ways to adapt it? Maybe that's part of the problem. Is we go in, you know, we were burned before by the budget was this and the scope was this, and the size kind of flipped, right? The budget grew and the scope contracted. So we think the next one's got to be that way too. I spoke to a carrier who said, as they were in the midst of a core system project, their board said, we're never doing this again. And I was like, okay, they're just upset because obviously you're going to have to do this again at some point. But there are lots of ways, if you have the right kind of flexibility in it, to be able to augment, adapt. And there are new tools that can actually sit on some really old legacy tech that seems to be stuck, and not adaptable, that actually there are new solutions that help to work around that without necessarily the workaround being, your employees, back to Kimberly's point, just clicking in lots of different screens and systems and rekeying, because that's not really a solution. That's we've used that tool far too often and put that on our people. Great conversation today. I appreciate the honesty, because it's not that everything's perfect. As an industry, we have a long way to go. As individual companies, we have a long way to go. And there are also some areas where we've actually done quite well, and there's some great tools at our disposal and neat ways that people are using those to make some progress. So thank you to everyone. As always, we have questions we couldn't get to, but thank you to the audience for asking the questions that you did. Jon, Kimberly, Sean, Randy, great conversation today. Thank you all very much.